Question 1. Q. Which one of the following is the best description of the term ecosystem? 2015. A community of organisms interacting with one another. B. That part of the earth which is inhabited by living organisms. C. A community of organisms together with the environment in which they live. D. The flora and fauna of a geographical area. Answer. C. Explanation. Environment and its component environment. Environment. It is everything that surrounds or affects an organism which comprises of both living biotic and non-living abiotic components. In biological sense, environment constitutes the physical nutrients, water, air, etc. And biological factors, biomolecules, organisms, along with their chemical interactions, chemical cycles, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, etc. Environment is not static and the two components continuously interact with each other to define and specify the habitat, where an organism lives, and ecosystem of an organism. The scientific study of the interactions between the organisms living in an environment and the environment itself is called ecology. Environmental components. Abiotic components, biotic components. Energy, microorganisms. Radiation, green plants. Temperature and heat flow, non-green plants. Soil, parasites. Water, man. Atmospheric gases and wind, animal. Ecology. Ecology is the branch which studies the interactions among organisms and their environment. Objects of study include interactions of organisms with each other and with the biotic components of their environment. The term ecology was coined in 1866 by the German biologist Ernst Haeckel from the Greek oikos meaning house or dwelling and logos meaning science or study. Thus, ecology is the study of the household or nature. Ecology encompasses study of individual, organisms, population, community, ecosystem, biome. Biosphere which form the various levels of ecological organization. Levels of organization. Levels of ecological organization. Individual. A living being that has the ability to act or function independently. Population. It is a group of organisms usually of same species, occupying a defined area during a specific time. Population growth rate is the percentage variation between the numbers of individuals in a population at two different times. It can be positive due to birth and/or immigration or negative due to death and emigration. The main limiting factors for the growth of population are biotic and abiotic components. The number of individuals per unit area at a given time is termed as population density. Community. Biotic community is a result of interdependence and interactions amongst population of different species in a habitat. This is an assemblage of populations of plants, animals, bacteria and fungi that live in an area and interact with each other. Communities in most instances are named after the dominant plant form species. For example, a grassland community is dominated by grasses, though it may contain herbs, shrubs, and trees, along with associated insects and animals of different species. On the basis of size and degree of relative independence, communities may be divided into two types. Major communities and minor communities. Major communities, these are large-sized and relatively independent. They depend only on the sun's energy from outside. For example, tropical evergreen forests. Minor communities, these are dependent on neighboring communities and are often called societies. They are secondary aggregations within a major community. For example, a mat of lichen on a cow dung pad. Ecosystem. Ecosystem is a community of organisms interacting with each other and with their environment, such that energy is exchanged with help of system-level processes, such as the cycling of elements. It is structural and functional unit of biosphere. The components of ecosystem and environment are same, i.e. biotic and abiotic components. Abiotic components, factors, they are the inorganic and non-living part of world. They are the most important determinants of where and how well an organism exists in an organism. It includes factors like energy, rainfall, temperature, atmosphere, soil, latitude and altitude. Biotic components, factors are the living components. Figure 1 classification of ecosystem. Biome. Biome is a large naturally occurring community of flora and fauna occupying a major habitat. They are characterized by climate, vegetation, soil, fauna, etc. The climatic factors generally determine boundaries of biome. E.g., rainforest biome is restricted mainly in equatorial region have evergreen forests with abundant fauna, while tundra biomes found in upper latitudes are devoid of trees and contain mainly lichen, mosses, etc., which can survive low temperatures. Plants and animals in a biome have common characteristics due to similar climates and can be found over a range of continents. Biosphere. The biosphere is the biological component of Earth which includes the lithosphere, hydrosphere and atmosphere. The biosphere includes all living organisms on Earth, together with the dead organic matter produced by them. Thus, it is that part of the Earth which is inhabited by living organisms. The energy required for life in biosphere mainly comes from sun. Since the energy is not uniformly distributed across biosphere, distribution of life also varies. Biodiversity, it is the variety of plant, flora, and animal species, fauna, found in the world or in a particular habitat or a geographical area. Question 2. Q. Which one of the following terms describes not only the physical space occupied by an organism, but also its functional role in the community of organisms? 2013. A. Ecotone. B. Ecological niche. C. Habitat. D. Home range. Answer. B. Explanation. Habitat of an organism. Habitat is the physical environment in which an organism lives. It corresponds to address of an organism. Habitat is only the physical part of environment and hence, the two should not be confused. The habitat for a fish may be a particular river but its environment composes of other things as well like sun, air, other aquatic animals, etc. An organism is not restricted to its home or habitat but has greater geographical area of coverage and interaction, i.e. home range is wider. In nature, many species occupy the same habitat but they perform different functions or role and thus, have a unique ecological niche. Home range. A home range is the area in which an animal lives and moves on a daily or periodic basis. It is a little bigger than its habitat. As humans, a home range will generally include the area from home right pointing arrow, office right pointing arrow, market right pointing arrow, home. Ecological niche. Niche refers to the unique functional role and position of a species in its habitat or ecosystem. Habitat of a species is like its address, i.e. where it lives, whereas niche is its profession, i.e. activities and responses specific to the species. A niche is unique for a species while many species share the habitat. No two species in a habitat can have the same niche. This is because of the competition with one another until one is displaced. For example, a large number of different species of insects may be pests of the same plant but they can coexist as they feed on different parts of the same plant. Niche plays an important role in conservation of organisms. Ecosystem. Ecosystem is a community of organisms interacting with each other and with their environment. Ecotone. An ecotone is a zone of junction or a transition area between two diverse ecosystems. It is where communities of ecosystems meet and integrate. For e.g., the mangrove forests represent an ecotone between marine and terrestrial ecosystem. Other examples are grassland, between forest and desert, estuary, between freshwater and saltwater, and riverbank or marshland, between dry and wet. Characteristics of ecotone. Ecotone may be narrow, between grassland and forest, or wide, between forest and desert. As it is a zone of transition, it has conditions intermediate to the adjacent ecosystems. Hence it is a zone of tension. Usually, the number and the population density of the species of an outgoing community decreases as we move away from community or ecosystem. A well-developed ecotone contains some organisms which are entirely different from that of the adjoining communities and shows edge effect. Ecotone and edge effect. Edge effects. It refers to the change in population of species that occur at the boundary of two habitats or at ecotone. The number of species and the population density of some of the species in the ecotone is much greater than in either ecosystem. This is called edge effect. The organisms which occur primarily in this zone are known as edge species. In the terrestrial ecosystems, edge effect is especially applicable to birds. For example, the density of birds is greater in the mixed habitat of the ecotone between the forest and the grassland. Question 3. Q. The Millennium Ecosystem Assessment describes the following major categories of ecosystem services: provisioning, supporting, regulating, preserving and cultural. Which one of the following is supporting service? 2012. A. Production of food and water. B. Control of climate and disease. C. Nutrient cycling and crop pollination. D. Maintenance of diversity. Answer. C. Explanation. Services of an ecosystem. An ecosystem is a group or community composed of living and non-living things and their interactions with each other. We as humans are an integral part of an ecosystem. The numerous benefits we obtain from the ecosystem are known by the term ecosystem services. Life and biodiversity on Earth depend on these services. Ecosystem services are classified into 4 services: provisioning services, supporting services, regulating services, cultural services and preserving services. Question 4. Q. Within biological communities, some species are important in determining the ability of a large number of other species to persist in the community. Such species are called blank 2000. A. Keystone species. B. Allopatric species. C. Sympatric species. D. Threatened species. Answer A. Explanation. Species. Species are a group of living organisms consisting of similar individuals capable of exchanging genes or of interbreeding, considered as the basic unit of taxonomy. Speciation. Specification is the evolutionary process by which populations evolve to become distinct species. The biologist Dorota F. Cook coined the term in 1906. Methods of speciation. Parapatric speciation. It is when speciation occurs in subpopulations of the same species that are mostly isolated from each other, but have a narrow area where their ranges overlap. Such species are called parapatric species. Peripatric speciation. It occurs when members of a population on the border of that population's habitat separate off from the main group and evolve over many generations to become a different species. Such species are called parapatric species. Allopatric speciation. It is when one species is separated into different groups due to geographic isolation of species restricting gene flow due to events like creation of mountain barrier. Such species are called allopatric species. Sympatric speciation. It is speciation that occurs when two groups of the same species live in the same geographic location, but they evolve differently until they can no longer interbreed and are considered different species. Such species are called sympatric species. Important definitions. Keystone species. A keystone species is a species that plays an essential role in the structure, functioning or productivity of a habitat or ecosystem at a defined level, habitat, soil, seed dispersal, etc. Disappearance of such species may lead to significant and disproportionate effect on ecosystem as compared to other species. Examples: bats and insects which act as pollinating agents and are a keystone species in terrestrial ecosystem. Similarly, corals act as keystone species of marine ecosystem. By focusing on keystone species, conservation actions for that species may help to preserve the structure and function of a wide range of habitats which are linked with that species during its life cycle. Indicator species. An indicator species is a species or group of species chosen as an indicator of, or proxy for, the state of an ecosystem or of a certain process within that ecosystem. Examples include crayfish as indicators of freshwater quality, corals as indicators of marine processes such as siltation, seawater rise and sea temperature fluctuation, or native plants as indicators for the presence and impact of alien species. Umbrella species. Umbrella species are species selected for making conservation-related decisions, typically because protecting these species indirectly protects the many other species that make up the ecological community of its habitat. Umbrella species can be used to help select the locations of potential reserves, find the minimum size of these conservation areas or reserves, and to determine the composition, structure and processes of ecosystems. Flagship species. Flagship species is a species selected to act as an ambassador, icon or symbol for a defined habitat, issue, campaign or environmental cause. By focusing on and achieving conservation of that species, the status of many other species which share its habitat or are vulnerable to the same threats may also be improved. Flagship species are usually relatively large and considered to be charismatic in Western cultures. Flagship species may or may not be keystone species and may or may not be good indicators of biological process. Priority species. Priority species is a term used by World Wildlife Fund (WWF) solely for the purposes of planning and simple communication. It is reflective of a key threat across that region such that conservation of the species will contribute significantly to a broader threat mitigation outcome. It is often crucial to the economic and or spiritual well-being of peoples within that region. Threatened species. Threatened species are any species, including animals, plants, fungi, etc., which are vulnerable to endangerment in the near future. International Union for Conservation of Nature (IUCN) is the foremost authority which regularly releases an IUCN Red List of threatened species. Question 5. Q. Which one of the following is the correct sequence of ecosystems in the order of decreasing productivity? 2013. A. Oceans, lakes, grasslands, mangroves. B. Mangroves, oceans, grasslands, lakes. C. Mangroves, grasslands, lakes, oceans. D. Oceans, mangroves, lakes, grasslands. Answer C. Explanation. Ecosystem productivity. In ecology, productivity of an ecosystem refers to the rate of production of biomass, i.e., the amount of organic matter accumulated in any unit time. It is usually expressed in units of mass per unit surface or volume per unit time. The mass unit may relate to dry matter or to the mass of carbon generated. Types of productivity. Primary productivity. Primary productivity is defined as the rate of which radiant energy is stored by the producers, most of which are photosynthetic, and to a much lesser extent the chemosynthetic microorganisms. Primary productivity is of two types: gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. Plants typically capture and convert about 1.6% of the solar energy that reaches Earth's surface and use about a quarter of the captured energy for metabolism and maintenance. Gross primary productivity. Gross primary productivity refers to the total rate of photosynthesis including the organic matter used up in respiration during the measurement period. It depends on the chlorophyll content. The rate of primary productivity are estimated in terms of either chlorophyll content as CHL per gram dry weight, unit area, or photosynthetic number, i.e., amount of CO2 fixed per gram CHL per hour. Net primary productivity. Net primary productivity refers to the rate of storage of organic matter in plant tissues in excess of the respiratory utilization by plants during the measurement period. It is also known as apparent photosynthesis or net assimilation. Around 1% of the solar energy reaching Earth's surface per unit area and time ends up as net primary productivity. This can be mathematically stated as net primary productivity equals gross primary productivity minus organic matter used in respiration. Secondary productivity. Secondary productivity is the rate of energy storage it consumes levels herbivores, carnivores and decomposers. Consumers tend to utilize already produced food materials in their respiration and also converts the food matter to different tissues by an overall process. It actually remains mobile, i.e., keeps on moving from one organism to another and does not live in situ like the primary productivity. Net productivity. Net productivity refers to the rate of storage of organic matter not used by the heterotrophs or consumers, i.e., equivalent to net primary production minus consumption by the heterotrophs during the unit period, as a season or year etc. It is thus the rate of increase of biomass of the primary producers which has been left over by the consumers. Net productivity equals net primary productivity minus consumption by heterotrophs consumers. The order of productivity of ecosystems. Tropical rainforests are among the most productive terrestrial ecosystems. Estuaries and coral reefs are most productive among aquatic ecosystems. Similarly, mangroves also have a high productivity comparable to corals, estuaries, etc. Grassland has lesser productivity than mangroves. The average ocean productivity is about 50 grams carbon per square meter per year. The average land productivity is 160 grams carbon per square meter per year. The productivity of lakes is comparable to ocean but slightly higher as it contains greater biomass per unit area due to small area but more organic matter. The open ocean has a relatively low production per unit area comparable to deserts. So, the correct sequence is mangroves greater than grassland greater than lakes greater than oceans. Do it yourself. Question 6. Q. Among living organisms, which one of the following is the most responsible factor for bringing about the origin of a new species? 2002. A. Isolation. B. Mutation. C. Natural selection. D. Sexual reproduction. Question 7. Q. Read about the following organizations and find out the nature of these organizations, their headquarters and about their objectives. Basic concepts and terminology part 2. Question 1. Q. With reference to food chains in ecosystems, consider the following statements. 2013. 1. A food chain illustrates the order in which a chain of organisms feed upon each other. 2. Food chains are found within the populations of a species. 3. A food chain illustrates the numbers of each organism which are eaten by others. Which of the statements given above are correct? A. 1 only. B. 1 and 2 only. C. 1, 2 and 3. D. None. Answer. A. Explanation. Function of ecosystem. It is the basic structural and functional unit of nature. Ecosystem is not a static entity. There is a continuous interaction that takes place between its various components which helps in not only survival of ecosystem but also maintenance of life on Earth. Energy flow. Continuous supply and flow of energy is required for the existence of an ecosystem. In an ecosystem, the flow of energy which takes place from producers to top consumers is unidirectional. To understand this flow, we first need to know the interactions taking place at various trophic levels. Trophic level. The trophic level of an organism is the position it occupies in a food chain. Trophic level is the representation of energy flow in an ecosystem. Trophic level interaction deals with how the members of an ecosystem are connected based on nutritional needs. Energy level decreases from the first trophic level onwards due to loss of energy in the form of heat at each trophic level. Only 10% of energy is generally available at each successive level. This is known as 10% rule. Trophic level interactions can be shown as ecological pyramids. Food web. Food chain. Major trophic levels. Trophic level source of energy examples. Produces solar energy green plants, photosynthetic. Protists and bacteria herbivores produces grasshoppers, water fleas. Antelope, termites primary carnivores herbivores wolves, spiders, some snakes. Warblers secondary carnivores primary carnivores killer whales, tuna, falcons omnivores several trophic levels human, rats, opossums, bears, raccoons, crabs. Detritivores and decomposes waste and dead bodies of other organisms. Fungi, many bacteria, earthworms, vultures. Food chain. Transfer of food energy from green plants producers through a series of organisms with repeated eating and being eaten link is called a food chain. Each step in the food chain is called trophic level. A food chain starts with producers and ends with top carnivores. The trophic level of an organism is the position it occupies in a food chain. There are two main types of food chain on the basis of the type of organism that starts food chain, grazing food chain. Detritus food chain. Grazing food chain. The primary consumers in the food chain utilizes the plant or plant part as their food, i.e. autotrophs or producers constitute the grazing food chain. This food chain begins from green plants at the base and the primary consumer is herbivore. Here, green plant at the base and herbivores are primary consumers. For example, in terrestrial ecosystem, grass is eaten by caterpillar, which is eaten by lizard and lizard is eaten by snake. In aquatic ecosystem phytoplankton, primary producers are eaten by zooplanktons which are eaten by small fishes and fishes are eaten by pelicans or larger fishes. Detritus food chain. This type of food chain starts from dead organic matter or decaying animals and plant bodies. Dead organic matter or detritus feeding organisms are called detrivorous. The detrivorous are eaten by predators. In an aquatic ecosystem, grazing food chain is the major conduit for energy flow. As against this, in a terrestrial ecosystem, a much larger fraction of energy flows through the detritus food chain than through the grazing food chain. The two food chains are linked. The initial energy source for detritus food chain is the waste materials and dead organic matter from the grazing food chain. Food web. Multiple interlinked food chains make a food web. Food web represents all the possible paths of energy flow in an ecosystem. If any of the intermediate food chain is removed, the succeeding links of the chain will be affected largely. The food web provides more than one alternative for food to most of the organisms in an ecosystem and therefore increases their chance of survival. Ecological pyramids. The pyramidal representation of trophic levels of different organisms based on their ecological position is called as an ecological pyramid. The producer forms the base of the pyramid and the top carnivore forms the tip. Other consumer trophic levels are in between. The pyramid consists of a number of horizontal bars depicting specific trophic levels. The length of each bar represents the total number of individuals or biomass or energy at each trophic level in an ecosystem. The ecological pyramids are of three categories. Pyramid of numbers. Pyramid of biomass. Pyramid of energy or productivity. Pyramid of numbers. Pyramid of numbers represents the total number of individuals of different species, population at each trophic level. Depending upon the size, the pyramid of numbers may not always be upright and may even be completely inverted. Pyramid of biomass. Pyramid of biomass is usually determined by collecting all organisms occupying each trophic level separately and measuring their dry weight. This overcomes the size difference problem because all kinds of organisms at a trophic level are weighed. Biomass is measured in gram per square meter. Each trophic level has a certain mass of living material at a particular time called as the standing crop. The standing crop is measured as the mass of living organisms, biomass, or the number in a unit area. For terrestrial ecosystems, the pyramid of biomass is upright as has a large base of primary producers with a smaller trophic level perched on top. For aquatic ecosystems, the pyramid of biomass may assume an inverted form. Pyramid of numbers for aquatic ecosystem is upright. Pyramid of energy. An energy pyramid represents the amount of energy at each trophic level and loss of energy at each transfer to another trophic level. Hence the pyramid is always upward, with a large energy base at the bottom. Limitations of ecological pyramids. It does not take into account the same species belonging to two or more trophic levels. It assumes a simple food chain, something that almost never exists in nature. It does not accommodate a food web. Moreover, saprophytes, plant, fungus, or microorganism that lives on decaying matter are not given any place in ecological pyramids even though they play a vital role in the ecosystem. Question 2. Q. With reference to the food chains in ecosystems, which of the following kinds of organism are known as decomposer organisms? 2013. 1. Virus. 2. Fungi. 3. Bacteria. Select the correct answer using the codes given below. 1 only. B. 2 and 3 only. C. 1 and 3 only. D. 1, 2 and 3 answer. D. Explanation. Decomposers. Decomposers are organisms that break down dead decaying organisms, and in doing so, they carry out the natural process of decomposition. Decomposers are very important for any ecosystem. If they weren't in the ecosystem, the plants would not get essential nutrients, and dead matter and waste would pile up. They are heterotrophic in nutrition. While the terms decomposer and detritivore are often interchangeably used, detritivores must ingest and digest dead matter via internal processes while decomposers can directly absorb nutrients through chemical and biological processes, hence breaking down matter without ingesting it. Thus, invertebrates such as earthworms or some predators like hawks are technically detritivores, not decomposers, since they must ingest nutrients and are unable to absorb them externally. There are two main types of decomposers, fungi. Bacteria. Question 3. Q. Which one of the following is the correct sequence of the food chain? 2014. Diatoms, crustaceans, herrings. B. Crustaceans, diatoms, herrings. C. Diatoms, herrings, crustaceans. D. Crustaceans, herrings, diatoms. Answer A. Explanation. Aquatic food web. The food chain which occurs in aquatic water is called aquatic food chain. Combination of such food chain refer to an aquatic food web. E.g. algae right pointing arrow. Protozoa right pointing arrow, small insects right pointing arrow, large aquatic insects right pointing arrow, small fish right pointing arrow, large fish. Phytoplankton are the primary producers in the oceans. They include diatoms, unicellular algae, Coccolithophores, unicellular, eukaryotic protist, cyanobacteria, blue-green algae, Synechococcus, Prochlorococcus, nostoc, Spiragyra etc. Dinoflagellates. Crustacean. They form a large, diverse arthropod taxon which includes fish familiar animals as crabs, lobsters, crayfish, shrimp, krill, woodlice, and barnacles. Herring. It refers to a small fish. Question 4. Q. A pesticide which is a chlorinated hydrocarbon is sprayed on a food crop. The food chain is food crop rightwards double arrow rat rightwards double arrow snake rightwards double arrow hawk. In this food chain, the highest concentration of the pesticide would accumulate in which one of the following? 2010. Food crop. B. Rat. C. Snake. D. Hawk. Answer D. Explanation. Pollutants and trophic level. Pollutants, especially non-degradable ones, move through the various trophic levels in an ecosystem. Non-degradable pollutants mean materials which cannot be metabolized by the living organisms. Example, chlorinated hydrocarbons. Chlorinated hydrocarbons or organochloride or CHC are hydrocarbons whose some or most hydrogen atoms have been replaced by chlorine, e.g. DDT, endosulfan etc. are non-biodegradable. Source of these pollutants. Pesticide and insecticides such as DDT, heptachlor, and endosulfan. They are absorbed by soil and plants and hence enter the food chain. Solvents and cleansing agents, chloroform, dichloromethane, dichloroethane, and trichloroethane are useful solvents. These solvents are miscible with water and effective in cleaning applications such as degreasing and dry cleaning. Plastics and microplastics. The plastics can enter the digestive system of organisms with other food and hence become part of food chain. Movement of these pollutants involves two main processes: bioaccumulation, biomagnification. Bioaccumulation. Bioaccumulation occurs within a trophic level and is increase in concentration of a substance in our bodies through food and environment. It refers to how pollutant enters a food chain. Biomagnification. Biomagnification refers to the tendency of pollutants to concentrate as they move from one trophic level to the next. It refers to movement of pollutant across trophic levels. If a pollutant is short-lived, it will be broken down before it can become dangerous. If it is not mobile, it will stay in one place and is unlikely to be taken up by organisms. If the pollutant is soluble in water, it will be excreted by the organism. Pollutants that dissolve in fats, however, may be retained for a long time. Bioconcentration. Bioconcentration occurs within a trophic level through absorption from water. Biodilution. Biodilution means decrease in the concentration of a substance with increase in trophic level. This occurs if nutrient has decays faster than the rate by which it's added. Question 5. Q. What would happen if phytoplankton of an ocean is completely destroyed for some reason? 2012. 1. The ocean as a carbon sink would be adversely affected. 2. The food chains in the ocean would be adversely affected. 3. The density of ocean water would drastically decrease. Select the correct answer using the codes given below. 1 and 2 only. B. 2 only. C. 3 only. D. 1, 2 and 3 answer A. Explanation. Homeostasis. Ecosystems are capable of maintaining their state of equilibrium. The process by which ecosystem regulates its own species structure and functional processes is known as homeostasis. For example, in a pond ecosystem, if the population of zooplankton increased, they would consume large number of the phytoplankton and as a result food would become scarce for zooplankton as well as other small fishes. This will lead to decrease in their number due to food scarcity. When the number of zooplankton is reduced because of starvation, phytoplankton populations start increasing. After some time the population size of zooplankton also increases and this process continues at all the trophic levels of the food chain. However, homeostatic capacity of ecosystems is not unlimited as well as not everything in an ecosystem is always well regulated. Humans are the greatest source of disturbance to ecosystems. So, in case a species is completely wiped out, homeostasis will fail and food chain will be severely affected. This is because energy flow cannot take place and will finally lead to death or extinction of the other dependent species. Role of phytoplanktons. They act as a base of marine ecosystem. They are the primary producers of the environment, meaning they are the first organisms to produce energy, which they create from light sources such as the sun. Plankton are an important food source for organisms in an aquatic environment. They exist in oceans, lakes, rivers, and streams. Algae floating in water is a common and easily found example of plankton. They have low biomass and do not add much to mass of oceans, but are high in number. They play an important role in carbon sequestration as the single-celled organisms dissolve CO2 into the sea from the atmosphere via photosynthesis. Carbon sequestration and carbon sink. Carbon sink. A carbon sink is a natural or artificial reservoir that accumulates and stores some carbon-containing chemical compound for an indefinite period. The process by which carbon sinks remove carbon dioxide (CO2) from the atmosphere is known as carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration is the process of capturing and storing atmospheric carbon dioxide from air to a sink. The world ocean is the major natural sink for carbon dioxide and is estimated to contain more than 90% of the inventory. The sequestration occurs with help of photosynthesis by phytoplanktons and calcification to form shells. Do it yourself. Question 6. Q. Which one of the following organisms is likely to show the highest concentration of DDT once it has been introduced into the ecosystem? 1997. A. Grasshopper. B. Toad. C. Snake. D. Cattle. Question 7. Q. Read about the following organizations and find out the nature of these organizations, who is head of these organizations, their headquarters and their working goals. Basic concepts and terminology part 3. Question 1. Q. Consider the following, 2011-2014. 1. Photosynthesis. 2. Respiration. 3. Decay of organic matter. 4. Volcanic action. Which of the above add carbon dioxide to the carbon cycle on Earth? 1 and 4 only, B. 2 and 3 only, C. 2, 3 and 4 only, D. 1 and 4. Answer, C. Question 2. Q. Which of the following add nitrogen to the soil? 2013. 1. Excretion of urea by animals. 2. Burning of coal by man. 3. Death of vegetation. Select the correct answer using the codes given below. 1 only. B. 2 and 3 only, C. 1 and 3 only, D. 1, 2 and 3 answer, D. Explanation. Nutrient. A nutrient is a substance used by an organism to survive, grow, and reproduce. Nutrient cycling. Nutrients of food matter never get used up. They can be recycled again and again indefinitely. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen and phosphorus as elements and compounds make up 97% of the mass of our bodies and are more than 95% of the mass of all living organisms. These elements or mineral nutrients are always in circulation, moving from non-living to living and then back to the non-living components of the ecosystem in a more or less circular fashion. This circular fashion is known as biogeochemical cycling. These cycles are largely energized by solar insolation. Types of nutrient cycle. Based on the replacement period, a nutrient cycle is referred to as perfect or imperfect cycle. A perfect cycle is one in which nutrients are replaced as fast as they are utilized. Most gaseous cycles are generally considered as perfect cycles. In imperfect cycles, some nutrients are lost from the cycle or are not immediately available for replacement. Sedimentary cycles are imperfect as nutrients get stored as sediments and are not available for cycling. Based on the nature of the reservoir, there are two types of cycles, namely gaseous cycle. Here, the reservoir of nutrients is the atmosphere or the hydrosphere. Such cycles include water cycle, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, etc. Sedimentary cycle. Here, the reservoir is the soil and rocks in Earth's crust. Such cycles include phosphorus cycle, sulfur cycle, calcium cycle, magnesium cycle, etc. Gaseous cycle. Carbon cycle. The carbon cycle is the biogeochemical cycle by which carbon is exchanged among the biosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere and atmosphere of the Earth. All living things are made of carbon. Carbon is also a part of the ocean, air, and even rocks. Because the Earth is a dynamic place, carbon does not stay still and continuously moves in Earth. The carbon cycle was discovered by Joseph Priestley and Antoine Lavoisier, and popularized by Humphrey Davy. Figure 2. Carbon cycle. Nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle is the biogeochemical cycle by which nitrogen is converted into multiple chemical forms as it circulates among atmosphere, terrestrial, and marine ecosystems. The conversion of nitrogen can be carried out through both biological and physical processes. Nitrogen is both the most abundant element in the atmosphere. It is a building block of proteins and nucleic acids such as DNA, and a crucially important component of all biological life. It is released back to soil and environment by process of excretion in form of excreta like urea, urine, etc. from our bodies or through decomposition by decomposers. The burning of fossil fuels add nitrogen to atmosphere. This occurs in various stages: nitrogen fixation, nitrification, assimilation, ammonification, denitrification. Figure 3. Nitrogen cycle. Processes in nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation is a process by which nitrogen in the air is converted into ammonia, NH3, or related nitrogenous compounds. It can be through biological processes or non-biological. Non-biological fixation. It can be through industrial processes like Haber-Bosch process or by atmospheric process of lightning. Biological fixation. Biological nitrogen fixation was discovered by the German agronomist Hermann Hellriegel and Dutch microbiologist Martinus Beijering. Biological nitrogen fixation (BNF) occurs when atmospheric nitrogen is converted to ammonia by an enzyme called a nitrogenase released by nitrogen-fixing bacteria like Azotobacter. Plants that contribute to nitrogen fixation include those of the legume family, which includes pulses and others like Frankia. They contain symbiotic bacteria called rhizobia within nodules in their root systems, producing nitrogen compounds that help the plant to grow and compete with other plants. When the plant dies, the fixed nitrogen is released, making it available to other plants. This helps to fertilize the soil. Assimilation. The nitrogen compounds in various forms, such as nitrate, nitrite, ammonia, and ammonium, are taken up from soils by plants, which are then used in the formation of plant and animal proteins. This is called assimilation. AMMONIFICATION. Ammonification is the process by which the organically bound nitrogen of microbial, plant, and animal biomass is recycled after their death. Ammonification is carried out by a diverse array of microorganisms that perform ecological decay services, and its product is ammonia or ammonium ion. Nitrification. Nitrification is the biological oxidation of ammonia or ammonium to nitrite followed by the oxidation of the nitrite to nitrate. The transformation of ammonia to nitrite is usually the rate-limiting step of nitrification. Nitrification is an aerobic process performed by small groups of autotrophic bacteria, most commonly Nitrosomonas and Nitrosococcus. Denitrification. Denitrification is a microbially facilitated process where nitrate number 3- is reduced and ultimately produces molecular nitrogen N2 through a series of intermediate gaseous nitrogen oxide products. Facultative anaerobic bacteria perform denitrification as a type of respiration that reduces oxidized forms of nitrogen in response to the oxidation to free nitrogen. Denitrification can leak N2O, which is an ozone-depleting substance and a greenhouse gas that can have a considerable influence on global warming. The process is performed primarily by heterotrophic bacteria, such as Prococcus denitrificans and various pseudomonas. Water cycle, hydrological cycle. It involves the continuous circulation of water in the Earth atmosphere system. Of the many processes involved in the water cycle, the most important are evaporation, transpiration, condensation, and precipitation. Although the total amount of water within the cycle remains essentially constant, its distribution among the various processes is continually changing. Despite a vast amount of water on Earth, only a small quantity is available for our use. This is because around 99% is not suitable for consumption. Reservoir percentage of the total. Oceans 97.25, ice caps and glaciers 2.05, groundwater 0.68, lakes 0.01, soil moisture 0.005, atmosphere 0.01, streams and rivers 0.0001, biosphere 0.00004. Process of water cycle. Evaporation, one of the major processes in the cycle, is the transfer of water from the surface of the earth to the atmosphere. By evaporation, water in the liquid state is transferred to the gaseous, or vapor, state. The main factors affecting evaporation are temperature, humidity, wind speed, and solar radiation. The principal source of water vapor is the oceans, but evaporation also occurs in soils, snow, and ice. Transpiration is the evaporation of water through minute pores, or stomata, in the leaves of plants. The transition process from the vapor state to the liquid state is called condensation. Condensation may take place as soon as the air contains more water vapor than it can receive from a free water surface through evaporation at the prevailing temperature. This condition occurs as the consequence of either cooling or the mixing of air masses of different temperatures. By condensation, water vapor in the atmosphere is released to form precipitation. This can be in form of rainfall, sleet, snowfall, etc. Sedimentary cycle. Sulfur cycle. The sulfur cycle is mostly sedimentary except two of its compounds, hydrogen sulfide H2S and sulfur dioxide SO2, which add a gaseous component. Sulfur enters the atmosphere from several sources like volcanic eruptions, combustion of fossil fuels, coal, diesel etc., from surface of ocean and from gases released by decomposition. Atmospheric hydrogen sulfide also gets oxidized into sulfur dioxide. Atmospheric sulfur dioxide is carried back to the earth after being dissolved in rainwater as weak sulfuric acid. Whatever the source, sulfur in the form of sulfates is taken up by plants and incorporated through a series of metabolic processes into sulfur-bearing amino acid which is incorporated in the proteins of autotroph tissues. It then passes through the grazing food chain. Sulfur bound in living organism is carried back to the soil, to the bottom of ponds and lakes and seas through excretion and decomposition of dead organic material. The sulfur in the soil and sediments is locked in organic coal, oil and peat and inorganic deposits, pyrite rock and sulfur rock in the form of sulfates, sulfides and organic sulfur. It is released by weathering of rocks, erosional runoff and decomposition of organic matter and is carried to terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems in salt solution. Phosphorus cycle. Unlike carbon and nitrogen, which come primarily from the atmosphere, phosphorus occurs in large amounts as a mineral in phosphate rocks and anthracite. Cycle from erosion and mining activities. The main storage for phosphorus is in the earth's crust. On land, phosphorus is usually found in the form of phosphates. The other major reservoir of phosphorus is living organisms themselves. It is a part of DNA molecules, of molecules that store energy, ATP and ADP, and of fats of cell membranes. Phosphorus is also a building block of certain parts of the human and animal body, such as the bones and teeth. Decomposition of dead and decaying matter release phosphorus in soil as phosphates. By the process of weathering and erosion, phosphates enter rivers and streams that transport them to the ocean and circulates in nature. In the ocean, phosphorus accumulates on continental shelves in the form of insoluble deposits. Let us now try to solve some questions based on the facts that we have just learned. Question 3. Q. In the grasslands, trees do not replace the grasses as a part of an ecological succession because of 2013. A. Insects and fungi. B. Limited sunlight and paucity of nutrients. C. Water limits and fire. D. None of the above. Answer. C. Question 4. Q. Lichens, which are capable of initiating ecological succession even on a bare rock, are actually a symbiotic association of 2014. A. Algae and bacteria. B. Algae and fungi. C. Bacteria and fungi. D. Fungi and mosses. Answer. B. Question 5. Q. Which one of the following is a useful functional association between fungi and the roots of higher plants? 1999. A. Biofertilizer. B. Coralloid root. C. Lichen. D. Mycorrhiza. Answer. D. Question 6. Q. If you walk through countryside, you are likely to see some birds stalking alongside the cattle to seize insects disturbed by their movement through grasses. 2014. Which of the following are such birds? 1. Painted stork. 2. Common myna. 3. Black-necked crane. Select the correct answer using the code given below. 1 and 2. B. 2 only. C. 2 and 3. D. 3 only. Answer. B. Explanation. Ecological succession and ecosystem development. Biotic communities are dynamic in nature and change over a period of time. The process by which communities of plant and animal species in an area are replaced or changed into another over a period of time is known as ecological succession. Succession is a universal process of directional change in vegetation on an ecological timescale. It occurs when a series of communities are replaced by other due to large-scale destruction or change in environmental conditions. Succession is characterized by the following: increased productivity, the shift of nutrients from the reservoirs, increased diversity of organisms with increased niche development, and a gradual increase in the complexity of food webs. Succession is a progressive series of changes which leads to the establishment of a relatively stable climax community. This occurs in various stages. Stages of ecological succession. The first plant to colonize an area is called the pioneer community. The final stage of succession is called the climax community. Each transitional, temporary community that is formed and replaced during succession is called a stage in succession or a cell community. The terminal, final stage of succession forms the community which is called as climax community. A climax community is stable, mature, more complex and long-lasting. The entire sequence of communities in a given area, succeeding each other, during the course of succession is termed here. The stage leading to the climax community are called successional stages which include several communities. Types of ecological succession. Primary succession. Primary succession takes place in over a bare or unoccupied areas such as rocks outcrop, newly formed deltas and sand dunes, emerging volcano islands and lava flows as well as glacial moraines, muddy area exposed by a retreating glacier where no community has existed previously. In primary succession on a terrestrial site, the new site is first colonized by a few hardy pioneer species that are often microbes, lichens and mosses. The pioneers over a few generations alter the habitat conditions by their growth and development. The organic matter produced by these pioneer species produce organic acids during decomposition that dissolve and etch the substratum, releasing nutrients to the substratum. Organic debris accumulates in pockets and crevices, providing soil in which seeds can become lodged and grow. The pioneer species disappear as the habitat conditions change and invasion of new species progresses, leading to the replacement of the preceding community. Secondary succession. Secondary succession is the sequential development of biotic communities after the complete or partial destruction of the existing community. A mature or intermediate community may be destroyed by natural events such as floods, droughts, fires, or storms or by human intervention such as deforestation, agriculture, overgrazing, etc. It is usually faster than primary succession. Example, an abandoned farmland can witness its succession over time. It is first invaded by hardy species of grasses that can survive in bare, sun-baked soil. These grasses may be soon joined by tall grasses and herbaceous plants. These dominate the ecosystem for some years along with mice, rabbits, insects and seed-eating birds. Eventually, some trees come up in this area, seeds of which may be brought by wind or animals. And over the years, a forest community develops. Development of trees depends on presence of sun, rain, nutrients and no disturbing factors like fire. Type of habitat. Terrestrial succession. Xeroxeric. Succession that occurs on land where moisture content is low, for e.g. on bare rock, is known as xerage. Plants growing in xeric condition are called xerophytes. Deroseric. Succession occurs on a dry soil or rock. Samoseric. The succession which occurs on sand dunes is called samoseric. Haloseric. The succession which occurs on saline soil is called haloseric. Aquatic succession. Hydroseric. Succession that takes place in a water body, like ponds or lake, is called hydroseric. Type of organism. Autogenic succession. When succession is brought about by living inhabitants of that community itself, the process is called autogenic succession. Allogenic succession. When succession is brought about by outside forces, it is known as allogenic succession. Biotic interactions. The interaction that occurs among different individuals of the same species is called interspecific interaction, while the interaction among individuals of different species in a community is termed as interspecific interaction. Specific terms are applied to interspecific interactions depending upon whether the interaction is beneficial, plus harmful, or neutral, 0, to individuals of the species. There are 7 main types of interaction. SNO. Interaction species 1, species 2. 1 mutualism plus 2 commensalism plus 3 competition 4 predation plus 5 parasitism plus 6 commensalism 7 mutualism 0. Mutualism. Mutualism is the name given to associations between pairs of species that bring mutual benefit. The individuals in the populations of each mutualist species grow and or survive and or reproduce at a higher rate when in the presence of individuals of the other species. Symbiotic mutualism. In a symbiotic mutualism, individuals interact physically and their relationship is biologically essential for survival. At least one member of the pair cannot live without close contact with the other. Symbiotic mutualism. Lichens. Lichen. The fungal algal symbiosis that occurs in lichens is a common example. The morphological structure of a lichen is a mass of fungal hyphae that forms around a small colony of algae cells. In this mutualism, the alga produces carbohydrates and other food byproducts through photosynthesis and metabolism, while the fungus absorbs the required minerals and water to allow for these processes to occur. Symbiotic mutualism. MYCORRHIZA. Mycorrhizae are symbiotic relationships that form between fungi and plants. The fungi colonize the root system of a host plant, providing increased water and nutrient absorption capabilities, while the plant provides the fungus with carbohydrates formed from photosynthesis. Mycorrhizae also offer the host plant increased protection against certain pathogens. Fungi are heterotrophic organisms and must absorb their food. Fungi also have the ability to easily absorb elements such as phosphorus and nitrogen, which are essential for life. Plants are autotrophic, producing their food in the form of carbohydrates through the process of photosynthesis. However, plants often have difficulty obtaining and absorbing many of the essential nutrients needed for life, specifically nitrogen and phosphorus, which they get with help of the fungi. Figure 4. Symbiotic mutualism in mycorrhizae. Symbiotic mutualism. Corals reefs. Most reef-building corals contain photosynthetic algae, called zooxanthellae, that live in their tissues. The corals and algae have a mutualistic relationship. The coral provides the algae with a protected environment and compounds they need for photosynthesis. In return, the algae produce oxygen and help the coral to remove wastes. Most importantly, zooxanthellae supply the coral with glucose, glycerol, and amino acids, which are the products of photosynthesis. The coral uses these products to make proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, and produce calcium carbonate. In addition to providing corals with essential nutrients, zooxanthellae are responsible for the unique and beautiful colors of many stony corals. Non-symbiotic mutualism. In this interaction, the mutualists live independent lives yet cannot survive without each other. The most obvious example of an interaction of this type is the relationship between flowering plants and their insect pollinators. Example: bees and many species of flowering plants interact with each other in a mutualistic fashion. In this interaction, the flower becomes pollinated by the insect, while the bee receives food in the form of pollen and nectar. Commensalism. In this relationship, one of the species benefits while the other is neither harmed nor benefited. Example 1. Sucker fish. Remora often attaches to a shark by means of its sucker, which is present on the top side of its head. This helps the remora get protection, a free ride, as well as meal from the leftover of the shark's meal. The shark does not, however, get any benefit, nor is it adversely affected by this association. Example 2. The relationship between trees and epiphytic plants. Epiphytes live on the surface of other plants like ferns, mosses and orchids and use the surface of trees for support and for obtaining sunlight and moisture. The tree gets no benefit from this relationship, nor are they harmed. Example 3. The interaction between sea anemone that has stinging tentacles and the clownfish that lives among them. The fish gets protection from predators which stay away from the stinging tentacles. The anemone does not appear to derive any benefit by hosting the clownfish. Example 4. Cow dung provides food and shelter to dung beetles. The beetles have no effect on the cows. Example 5. The relationship between birds like common myna or cattle egrets and cattle. This bird moves about in the pastures and follows livestock such as cattle and horses. The cattle egret eats up the insects hiding under vegetation close to the grounds, which gets stirred up when the cattle walk through them. Competition. When two or more organisms in the same community seek the same resource, e.g., food, water, nesting space, ground space, which is in limiting supply to the individual seeking it, they compete with one another. This is an interaction between two populations in which both species are harmed to some extent as resources are reduced for each of them and thus harming their growth. If the competition is among members of the same species, it is called intraspecific. Competition among individuals of different species, it is referred to as interspecific competition. Individuals in populations experience both types of competition to a greater or lesser degree. Predation. In this relation, predators benefit as they get food while prey loses his life and is directly harmed. Predators tend to be larger than their prey and consume them from the outside. Predators like leopards, tigers and cheetahs use speed, teeth and claws to hunt and kill their prey. They keep prey populations under control. But for predators, prey species could achieve very high population densities and cause ecosystem instability. Predators also help in maintaining species diversity in a community by reducing the intensity of competition among competing prey species. Parasitism. Parasitism involves parasite, usually a small-sized organism living in or on another living species called the host from which the parasite gets its nourishment and often shelter. Many organisms like animal, bacteria and viruses are parasites of plants and animals. Plants like dodder plant, cuscuta, and mistletoe, loranthus are parasites that live on flowering plants. Parasites that feed on the external surface of the host organism are called ectoparasites. E.g. lice on humans. Many marine fish are infested with ectoparasitic copepods. The female mosquito is not considered a parasite, although it needs our blood for reproduction. This is because it doesn't live on the host. In contrast, endoparasites are those that live inside the host body at different sites: liver, kidney, lungs, red blood cells, etc. Brood parasitism in birds is a fascinating example of parasitism in which the parasitic bird lays its eggs in the nest of its host. E.g. cuckoo quail. Amensalism. Amensalism is an interaction where one species suffers and the other interacting species experiences no effect. One particular form of commensalism is allelopathy, which occurs with plants. Allelopathy involves the production and release of chemical substances by one species that inhibit the growth of another. Example 1. The bread mold fungi Penicillium produce penicillin, an antibiotic substance which inhibits the growth of a variety of bacteria. Example 2. A large tree shades a small plant, retarding the growth of the small plant. The small plant has no effect on the large tree. The black walnut secretes a chemical from its roots that harms neighboring plants, an example of commensalism. Mutualism. Mutualism describes the relationship between two species which do interact but do not affect each other. True mutualism is extremely unlikely and impossible to prove. Species. Painted stock. The species is widespread throughout Indian subcontinent and Asian plains. It is mainly resident with only some seasonal movements. The painted stock is threatened by habitat loss, disturbance, pollution, egg and chick collection and hunting of adults. But in spite of several protected areas, the species is currently classified as near threatened. The painted stock frequents a variety of wet habitats such as marshes, lakes, ponds, freshwater swamp forest, and also flooded cultivated fields. The painted stock feeds on fish, crustaceans, amphibians, reptiles and insects. Black-necked crane. The black-necked crane, Grus niviculus, is a medium-sized crane in Asia that breeds on the Tibetan Plateau and remote parts of India and Bhutan. The breeding areas are alpine meadows, lakeside and riverine marshes and river valleys. They also make use of barley and wheat fields in these areas. It is a vulnerable species. Do it yourself. Question 7. Q. Read about the following organizations and find out the nature of these organizations, their members, and the work done by it. Biodiversity Part 1. Important concepts. Question 1. Q. Consider the following statements. 2011. 1. Biodiversity is normally greater in the lower latitudes as compared to the higher latitudes. 2. Along the mountain gradients, biodiversity is normally greater in the lower altitudes as compared to the higher altitudes. Which of the statements given above are correct? A. 1 only. B. 2 only. C. Both 1 and 2. D. Neither 1 nor 2. Answer C. Explanation. Biodiversity. The word biodiversity is an abbreviated version of biological diversity. The Convention on Biological Diversity defines biodiversity as the variability among living organisms from all sources including inter alia, terrestrial, marine and other aquatic ecosystems and the ecological complexes of which they are a part. This includes diversity within species, between species, and of ecosystems. Thus, biodiversity refers to the variety of forms, the different plants, animals and microorganisms. It also includes the genes they contain and the ecosystem they form. Estimates of the number of species on Earth vary from 3 million to 100 million. The UN Convention on Biological Diversity says there are some 13 million species, of which 1.75 million have been described. Biodiversity distribution. Biodiversity is not evenly distributed, rather it varies greatly across the globe as well as within regions. The study of the spatial distribution of organisms, species and ecosystems is the science of biogeography. Among other factors, the diversity of all living things biota depends on temperature, precipitation, altitude, soils, geography and the presence of other species. The major factors that directly impact distribution are latitude. Biodiversity is normally greater in the lower latitudes as compared to the higher latitudes. Generally, there is an increase in biodiversity from the poles to the tropics. Thus, localities at lower latitudes have more species than localities at higher latitudes. This is often referred to as the latitudinal gradient in species diversity. Altitude. Biodiversity is normally greater in the lower altitudes as compared to the higher altitudes. The high altitude region has mainly tundra ecosystem with low ecological productivity and low biodiversity. Hemisphere. Generally, species density is greatest in the southern hemisphere. 70% of the world's species is found in just 12 countries: Australia, Brazil, China, Colombia, Costa Rica, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ecuador, India, Indonesia, Madagascar, Mexico and Peru. Question 2. Q. Biodiversity forms the basis for human existence in the following ways. 2011. 1. Soil formation. 2. Prevention of soil erosion. 3. Recycling of waste. 4. Pollination of crops. Select the correct answer using the codes given below. 1, 2 and 3 only. D. 2, 3 and 4 only. C. 1 and 4 only. D. 1, 2, 3 and 4 only. Answer D. Explanation. Services provided by biodiversity. Biodiversity has multiple roles in relation to the delivery of ecosystem services and represents therefore a central component of the framework. It mainly provides 3 types of services. Question 3. Q. The Himalayan range is very rich in species diversity. Which one among the following is the most appropriate reason for this phenomenon? 2011. A. It has a high rainfall that supports luxuriant vegetative growth. B. It is a confluence of different biogeographical zones. C. Exotic and invasive species have not been introduced in this region. D. It has less human interference. Answer B. Explanation. Levels of biodiversity. Biodiversity is considered to exist at 3 levels: genetic, species and ecosystem diversity. Genetic diversity, species diversity, ecosystem diversity. 1. Genetic diversity is the total number of genetic characteristics in the genetic makeup of a species. 2. A single species might show high diversity at the genetic level, e.g. man, Chinese, Indian American, African, etc. India has more than 50,000 genetically different strains of rice and 1,000 varieties of mango. 3. Genetic diversity allows species to adapt to changing environments. Thus diversity aims to ensure that some species survive drastic changes and thus carry on. Desirable genes. 1. It is the ratio of one species population over total number of organisms across all species in the given biome. 0 would be infinite diversity, and 1 represents only one species present. 2. More than 70% of all the species recorded are animals, wild plants including algae, fungi, bryophytes. Gymnosperms and angiosperms comprise no more than 22% of the total. 3. Among animals, insects are the most species-rich taxonomic group, making up more than 70% of the total. That means, out of every 10 animals on this planet, 7 are insects. Among vertebrates, fishes constitute largest diversity. 1. Ecological or ecosystem diversity refers to the different types of habitats. A habitat is the cumulative factor of the climate, vegetation and geography of a region. 2. It includes various biological zones, like lake, desert, coast, estuaries, wetlands, mangroves, coral reefs, etc. 3. At the ecosystem level, India, for instance, with its deserts, rainforests, mangroves, coral reefs, wetlands, estuaries, and alpine meadows has a greater ecosystem diversity than a Scandinavian country like Norway. Measurement of biodiversity, species diversity. Diversity is a single statistics in which the number of species richness and evenness are compounded. Species richness. It is the measure of number of species found in a community. Species evenness. It measures the proportion of a species at a given site, e.g. low evenness indicates that a few species dominate the site. Measure of species richness alpha diversity. It refers to the diversity within a particular area or ecosystem and is usually expressed by the number of species, i.e., species richness in that ecosystem. Beta diversity. It is a comparison of diversity between ecosystems, usually measured as the change in amount of species between the ecosystems. Gamma diversity. It is a measure of the overall diversity for the different ecosystems within a region. Gamma diversity is 12 in these three habitats. Species richness in India. India is recognized as one of the mega-diverse countries, rich in biodiversity and associated traditional knowledge. India has 23.39% of its geographical area under forest and tree cover. With just 2.4% of the land area, India accounts for nearly 7% of the recorded species even while supporting almost 18% of human population. In terms of species richness, India ranks 7th in mammals, 9th in birds and 5th in reptiles. India represents 2 realms, 5 biomes, 10 biogeographic zones. Measures of Indian biodiversity. Realms. Biogeographic realms are large spatial regions within which ecosystems share broadly similar biota. Realm is a continent or subcontinent-sized area with unifying features of geography and fauna and flora. There are 8 main realms in world. The Indian region is composed of 2 realms. They are the Himalayan region represented by Palearctic realm and the rest of the subcontinent represented by Malayan realm. Biomes. The term biome means the main groups of plants and animals living in areas of certain climate patterns. It includes the way in which animals, vegetation and soil interact together. The 5 biomes of India are tropical humid forests, tropical dry or deciduous forests, including monsoon forests, warm deserts and semi-deserts, coniferous forests and alpine meadows. Biogeographic zones. Biogeographic zones were used as a basis for planning wildlife protected areas in India. Biogeographic zones is a region consisting of animal and plants with similar or shared characteristics throughout. There are 10 biogeographic zones which are distinguished clearly in India. They are further subdivided into provinces for detailed study. The major biogeographic zones of India are as follows. Trans-Himalayas. An extension of the Tibetan Plateau, harboring high-altitude cold desert in Ladakh, J&K, and Lahore Spiti, HP, comprising 5.7% of the country's landmass. Himalayas. The entire mountain chain running from northwestern to northeastern India, comprising a diverse range of biotic provinces and biomes, 7.2% of the country's landmass. Desert. The extremely arid area west of the Aravalli Hill Range, comprising both the salty desert of Gujarat and the sand desert of Rajasthan. 6.9% of the country's landmass. Semi-arid. The zone between the desert and the Deccan Plateau, including the Aravalli Hill Range. 15.6% of the country's landmass. Western Ghats. The hill ranges and plains running along the western coastline, south of the Tapti River, covering an extremely diverse range of biotic provinces and biomes. 5.8% of the country's landmass. Deccan Peninsula. The largest of the zones, covering much of the southern and south-central plateau with a predominantly deciduous vegetation. 4.3% of the country's landmass. Gangetic Plain. Defined by the Ganges River system, these plains are relatively homogeneous in terrain but have high diversity. 11% of the country's landmass. Northeast India. The plains and non-Himalayan hill ranges of northeastern India, with a wide variation of vegetation. 5.2% of the country's landmass. Islands. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the Bay of Bengal, with a highly diverse set of biomes and Lakshadweep group of islands are part of it. 0.03% of the country's landmass comes under this type. Coasts. A large coastline distributed both to the west and east of India. Exotic species, often referred to as alien, non-native, non-indigenous, or introduced. Species are those that occur in areas outside of their natural geographic range. It has arrived there by human activity, either deliberate or accidental. Alien species have been moved by humans to areas outside of their native ranges. Once transported, they become removed from the predators, parasites, and diseases that kept them in balance in their native environments. As a result of the loss of these controls, they often become pests in the areas into which they are introduced. Invasive species. An invasive species is a species that is not native to a specific location, an introduced species, and that has a tendency to spread to a degree believed to cause damage to the environment, human economy or human health. It is a subset of exotic species. Question 4. Q. 3 of the following criteria have contributed to the recognition of Western Ghats, Sri Lanka and Indo-Burma regions as hotspots of biodiversity, 2011. 1. Species richness. 2. Vegetation density. 3. Endemism. 4. Ethnobotanical importance. 5. Threat perception. 6. Adaptation of flora and fauna to warm and humid conditions. Which 3 of the above are correct criteria in this context? 1, 2 and 6, B, 2, 4 and 6, C, 1, 3 and 5, D, 3, 4 and 6 answer, C. Explanation. Biodiversity hotspots. Hotspots are the richest and most threatened reservoirs of plant and animal life of the earth. They have maximum number of endemic species. 25 terrestrial hotspots have been identified for the conservation of biodiversity. They occupy 1.4% of the Earth's surface and 20% of world's the human population lives in these areas. Around the world, these sites support nearly 60% of the world's plant, bird, mammal, reptile, and amphibian species with a very high share of endemic species. A biodiversity hotspot is a biogeographic region with significant levels of biodiversity that is threatened with destruction. The status is designated by Conservation International. Norman Myers first gave this list of 25 hotspots in 1988, which was later revised by Conservation International. To qualify as a biodiversity hotspot on Myers' 2000 edition of the hotspot map, a region must meet 2 strict criteria viz. Must have at least 1,500 species of vascular plants as endemics, greater than 0.5% of world's total, has to have lost at least 70% of its primary vegetation habitat. Endemic species. Endemic species are plants and animals that exist only in one geographic region. Species can be endemic to large or small areas of the earth. Some are endemic to a particular continent, some to part of a continent, and others to a single island. Usually an area that contains. Endemic species is isolated in some way, so the species have difficulty spreading to other areas, or it has unusual environmental characteristics to which endemic species are uniquely adapted. In isolated environments such as the Hawaiian Islands, Australia, and the southern tip of Africa, as many of 90% of naturally occurring species are endemic. Some common examples are Asiatic lion found only in gir forests of Gujarat, Sindhi deer found in Loktik Lake of Manipur, lion-tailed macaque in Western Ghats, Kashmir stag in Kashmir, etc. List of hottest biodiversity hotspots in India. There are 4 biodiversity hotspots present in India. They are the Eastern Himalayas, Arunachal Pradesh, Bhutan, Eastern Nepal. Indo-Burma and Purvanchal Hills, Arak and Yoma, Eastern Bangladesh. The Western Ghats and Sri Lanka. Andaman and Nicobar Island part of Sunderland. The Eastern Himalayas. The Eastern Himalayas is the region encompassing Bhutan, northeastern India, Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh mainly, and southern, central, and eastern Nepal. The abrupt rise of the Himalayan mountains from less than 500 meters to more than 8,000 meters results in a diversity of ecosystems that range from alluvial grasslands and subtropical broadleaf forests along the foothills to temperate broadleaf forests in the midhills, mixed conifer and conifer forests in the high hills, and alpine meadows above the tree line. Biodiversity of the Eastern Himalayas. The Eastern Himalayan hotspot has nearly 163 globally threatened species, both flora and fauna, including the one-horned rhinoceros, vulnerable, the wild Asian water buffalo, endangered. Mammals like the golden langur, the Himalayan ta, the pygmy hog, langurs, Asiatic wild dogs, sloth bears, gors, muntjac, sambar, snow leopard, black bear, blue sheep, takin, the Gangetic dolphin, wild water buffalo, swamp deer call the Himalayan range their home. The Indo-Burma region. The Indo-Burma region encompasses several countries. It is spread out from eastern Bangladesh to Malaysia and includes northeastern India south of Brahmaputra River, Myanmar, the southern part of China's Yunnan province, Lao peoples. Democratic Republic, Cambodia, Vietnam and Thailand. The Indo-Burma region is spread over 2 million square km of tropical Asia. Since this hotspot is spread over such a large area and across several major landforms, there is a wide diversity of climate and habitat patterns in this region. Biodiversity. Many of the species, especially some freshwater turtle species, are endemic. Almost 1,300 bird species exist in this region including the white-eared night heron, endangered, the great crowned crochus, endangered, and the orange-necked partridge, near threatened. It is estimated that there are about 13,500 plant species in this hotspot, with over half of them endemic. Ginger, for example, is native to this region. The Western Ghats. Western Ghats, also known as the Sahyadri Hills, encompasses the mountain forests in the southwestern parts of India and highlands of southwestern Sri Lanka. The wide variation of rainfall patterns in the Western Ghats, coupled with the region's complex geography, produces a great variety of vegetation types. Biodiversity. These include scrub forests in the low-lying rain shadow areas in the plains, deciduous and tropical rainforests up to about 1,500 meters, and a unique mosaic of montane forests and rolling grasslands above 1,500 meters. The important populations include Asian elephant, Miligirita, Indian tigers, lion-tailed macaque, all endangered, Indian giant squirrel, least concern, etc. The Sundaland region. Sundaland is a region in Southeast Asia that covers Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei and Indonesia. India is represented by the Nicobar Islands. Biodiversity. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands have a tropical rainforest canopy, made of a mixed flora with elements from Indian, Myanmar, Malaysian and endemic floral strains. So far, about 2,200 varieties of plants have been recorded, out of which 200 are endemic and 1,300 do not occur in mainland India. It also contains mangroves, deciduous, submontane forests along with evergreen rainforests. It has a unique fauna. Around 50 unique mammals are found here like saltwater crocodile, the state animal of Andaman dugong, also known as the sea cow, which can be found in Little Andaman. About 270 species of birds are found in the territory, 14 of them are endemic, the majority too. The Nicobar Island Group. The territory is home to about 225 species of butterflies and moths. 10 species are endemic to these islands. Mount Harriet National Park is one of the richest areas of butterfly and moth diversity on these islands. Hotspots. A hotspot is an area of ocean that merits special protection because of its wildlife and significant underwater habitats. Andaman and Nicobar and Lakshadweep Islands have been named as the new hotspots by IUCN and Oceanographer Sylvia Earle of Mission Blue, an organization involved in the study of oceans. Question 5.